Good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kent Rothrock. I'm the Director of Managed Services at Avinion Incorporated. I've got Wendy Peliquin, our Business Development Manager, alongside here, and we're going to talk to you about the future of managed services. So just a quick little overview here. We'll breeze through some of the challenges facing organizations and what managed services are and why they're important and a good solution for those challenges. And then hopefully we'll have time for some questions. Again, Avinion is a privately held company, global firm, been in business 31 years. Again, a lot of you guys may remember me as Highland Mapping, but we merged with Avinion last March. So I'm now part of that company as well as the rest of my team. So, you know, managed services is a thing that's been evolving for a while. It's by no means unique to GIS. We're obviously at a GIS conference, so we're going to talk about it in that context. But this is something that's, you know, way beyond just GIS and affects all IT and even other industries. So there's three primary challenges we're going to talk about. The first is technical challenges. So obviously we all know technology, we're all racing to keep up with technology all the time. It's changing rapidly. We've got complicated system integrations going on at most of our sites. And then we encounter periodic challenging projects. So obviously, why does the managed services a solution for this? And we'll get to that. A little more about the challenges. You know, it's very challenging to manage all the hardware, the software, the network and security systems. You know, we're trying to keep up with technology, whether it's replacing hardware components, upgrading software, and things like that. So as far as the integrations, we're in an era now where we're trying to integrate all these systems together. And so, you know, there's this big effort required. How do we make, you know, one system talk to GIS? Obviously, GIS is the ideal platform for the integration because it does have the spatial component that most of these things need, you know, map-centric. So in terms of the complicated integrations, we're having to do a lot of data processing, a lot of design work, making sure that primary keys and foreign keys are adequate so that we can join data from one system to another system and that it'll work correctly. A lot of what we're doing with these integrations is having to produce REST services and automated processes that can support these sorts of things. Finally, as far as challenging projects, we run into situations with an organization where maybe you don't have the technological expertise to do it. It's unfamiliar to you, and also a common thing is scale problems. So you've got some project you need done, but you just don't have enough people. Maybe the people don't know how to do it, but you just don't have enough people, or if you do, they don't have enough time. So human challenges, and again, a lot of this stuff overlaps, limited resources and knowledge, staffing challenges and turnover, and again, periodic difficult projects. Obviously, you know, again, the lack of staff time, the lack of the proper roles in place can be a problem, and lack of qualified staff to maintain data or manage this stuff. Turnover is a very common thing in 2023. The labor market is crazy, and basically anywhere you go at this conference talking to people, whether they're private or public sector, you're gonna hear the same thing about challenges trying to find people and the fact that there's turnover. And managed services is a great way to mitigate turnover for sure. And then again, challenging projects in a human context. It might be a one-off project. A good example is a situation where maybe you're a tax office, you want to go to the parcel fabric. Well, that's not something you don't need to learn how to do because you're only going to do it one time. You're going to go to the parcel fabric one time. You're never going to do it again. You're just going to maintain after that. So again, it's something that may make sense to hire somebody else to do it for you. And then we have financial challenges. So limited budgets, again, this gets back to the human resources component. Maybe this particular organization can't afford to pay really qualified people or keep them around. Again, gets into that staff turnover thing. Hardware and software is very expensive to keep up with and maintain. So a lot of your hosting environments that are also managed services sort of gets around the challenges of having IT staff to do all that security and replacing servers every couple of years. Emergencies, which could have been its own category here, but emergencies are something that a lot of people don't think about. They're costly. They cost a lot of money. They require a lot of planning, and you're going to need a lot of resources in a hurry when you have emergencies. And I don't need to talk in North Carolina about natural disasters. Everybody in the eastern part of the state certainly knows all about that. And again, difficult projects, same sort of thing. They cost money. So a lot of times to do it in-house doesn't make sense. So what are managed service providers? Again, here's a pretty wordy explanation. I'll just say the term has changed a little bit. It more or less used to apply to infrastructure or be more device-centric, and now it's evolved to include continuous regular management, maintenance, and support of a particular system or infrastructure. And my final point will be that the internet has greatly helped with the delivery of managed services. Again, without getting too much into my history, for years I ran a Highland Mapping. I remember for many years doing tech support. I can't believe I did it now, just over the phone with no screen capture. And now I don't think I could do it now. Now every time we jump on a Zoom, and I'm looking at your screen or taking control and helping out. And I would go back, 2008, I was doing all that just like, okay, what do you see now? What do you see? So the internet and the proliferation of the screen sharing software has greatly accelerated managed services as a great solution. With that, I'll hand it over to Wendy.
Yeah, so as there are a lot of different definitions of managed services, there are also a lot of different types of managed services. This can be anything from managing your architecture, your hardware, security of your system. That's a huge thing that a lot of organizations are now being faced with cybersecurity and making sure that their systems are secure. It could simply be something just as web hosting or somewhere that you want to store your data, be able to access that. Sometimes it's something that's going to be on premise or in the cloud for you. And of course, a lot of it is even application development. You want somebody to develop an application, continue to maintain that application for you, and not just specific separate software. And of course, it can also be something where maybe when it's just the environment, you bring your own licenses, or they're providing a software and environment and providing those licenses for you. So there are a lot of different flavors of what managed services can be. It can be all of the above, some of the above. And another thing to consider too, is this something where they're monitoring it, or is it, being proactive, or is it, only get a notification and jumping in? Are they upgrading your software if they are managing your software for you? And then of course, this also extends into just general IT and GIS services. It can include doing your data editing, your data collection on a periodic or continuous basis, creating maps for you, that web app mobile support. So when you think of managed services, just think of there's a lot of different things that it can be. There's a lot of different types out there. And so, as Kent mentioned, some of the challenges leads into why managed services. One of the big things talked about, human resources that also extends into budgeting is it's going to extend the capabilities of your team. When you're working with a company that offers managed services, a lot of times you're getting access to their entire team. So instead of having, one person on your team who may specialize in one thing or know a little bit about a lot of different things, you're now able to access and tap into a team of experts. Kent also mentioned emergencies. Emergencies happen. Something goes down. Maybe your portal goes down and you're on vacation and you need help, and, having that reach back support. Or, your system, there's a flood in your server room. If you have something on premise, there's a lot of different things, and being able to call them and then be able to respond and jump in immediately helps. And a lot of it is also that institutional knowledge and documentation. As Kent mentioned, there's a lot of turnover going on in the job market. There's a lot of people who are retiring. And so when they go, that knowledge a lot of times goes with them. They may have something documented, they may have, a little bit here and there, but a lot of it, just because you've done it for so long, you don't always capture everything that you know. So this helps keep that business continuity. So if somebody does leave or somebody's retiring, you have a team there who has that information and they can continue and keep your department up and running without skipping a beat. And a lot of it too also comes with that change management. As the software is continuing to evolve, it's growing, Esri's adding more capabilities. It's also going to change the way that you are doing business and how you manage your data, how you work with other groups. And of course, a lot of times it's, the resourcing of time. You may have team members, you may have the best team members who know how to do everything, but you may not have enough of them and they only have so many hours a day that they can do everything. So working with a company to provide managed services also allows your team to work on more strategic initiatives and not get caught into that day-to-day monotonous managing that administration of, okay, do they really need to be the one going and adding users? That's something that, you can sit there and you can do in your sleep, but it takes time and it's taking time away from bigger projects that you could focus on. And then of course, a lot of it's also a cost control for budgeting. A lot of managed services will have an annual contract or a monthly contract with those fees, and knowing what's included in it, okay, well, you know what? This actually includes emergencies. So if I have an emergency, I know I'm not going to have to pay more money. This is my cost for the year. I can easily budget that, get that approved in my system, and we're all good to go. So there's a lot of different reasons why to explore managed services, but also want to, look at a core example here. So I'm not going to read all this. This is a whole lot of text, but this is a article that was in Forbes of, what is a managed service anyway? But really, this essentially breaks down what a customer versus the provider understood what their managed services can be for 10 pieces of networking gear. And as you can see, what the customer is expecting is not the same as what the service provider is expecting. So really, if you are going to explore and look at managed services, there's several things to consider. Make sure you have a clearly defined scope and you and the vendor or the managed service provider are talking the same language, using the same terms, that you understand exactly what will be managed and who will be managing that for you. Also look at what your contract period is. Is this something where you know that you have a July 1 budget year and it runs July 1st through June 30th, but your procurement department is going to take 6 weeks at the start of your budget year to actually get a contract in place? And does that mean you're 6 weeks without a contract, which means you may not be covered? So make sure that, you add a little bit of buffer in there and know that, your service provider will understand, okay, we can do a notice to proceed because it's approved, we're moving forward, but make sure you don't have any gaps. Also make sure you understand what your service level agreement is. And this is really setting those expectations of how quickly they're going to respond to what types of requests. Does your team need 24-hour support? If you do, there's a lot, especially if you're dealing with emergency management and next-gen 911 or critical infrastructure, and you have teams working all the time, you may need that support to be able to call at any hour, but also know that's something you're going to pay for. It's going to cost you a lot more money for that 24-hour support. So is that something that, okay, well, maybe you don't need the 24-hour support and you can make those adjustments. Also find out, if the organization is offering that support onshore or offshore. Because a lot of times with that 24-hour support, they may have resources all over the world they're using, and you need to make sure with your IT department that that's not going to be a violation of any of your IT policies as well. And then also, really make sure that you're talking about the communication. What happens when you have an issue or problem? Who do you call? Who do you put in a ticket to? What is that process for escalating when something is wrong? Or is it, who do they communicate to on your team if there's a problem, or if they're, doing continuous monitoring? They're like, oh, hey, you know what? We've noticed that there's this problem. You're almost out of RAM space. So if you don't add more, you're going to have a bigger issue. And then, of course, as part of that communication as well, understanding who can report issues and problems to them. Do you want everybody in your organization to have access to put in a ticket, Or do you want to kind of vet those first? Because a lot of times somebody may be reporting an issue that's not covered under your managed services, or it's something that you could easily answer and that's covered under what you're supposed to be responsible with that you worked out, when you were defining the scope with your managed service provider. So definitely make sure and take the time and talk through these things. There's, always something to consider anytime you're engaging with a provider. But, definitely start here and make sure, like I said, you're talking the same language and you all have that same common understanding of what they're going to do. So with that, leave it. Does anybody have any questions about managed services or, kind of starting talking about managed services engagements with providers? Nope, no questions. That means presentation covered it all. Excellent. That's always good to know. All right.
Thank you very much.